Thank you, Steve. Steve asked me to address as part of this the American perspective in response to this discussion. How does governance affect U.S. views of an engagement with Ukraine? And I think the answer is it's quite significant. I want to walk through some of the rationale for this. First of all, if you think about it, we're having a conference today on governance in Ukraine, not Ukraine's integration with Europe. So whether you like it or not, the agenda, the discussion is not in the right center of gravity from a Ukrainian perspective because of a set of issues of governance. So that affects the perceptions and engagement of everyone here in this room of the perspective from Washington. The second, let me offer an anecdote on how governance, I think, is also relevant to engagement from the West perspective. I used to work for NATO Secretary General Lord Robertson at NATO headquarters. And we were preparing for a NATO summit during the years of President Kuchma. This was in the wake of lots of angst in the relationship, not just from the issue of Kolchuga and potential arms sales to Saddam Hussein, but also Gaza and increasing concerns of issues of governance and freedoms within Ukraine. And it led to real concerns, expression of concerns from Washington and London as well, that when we were convening these leaders around the summit table for the Euro-Atlantic Partnership Council, and sitting there in alphabetical order is Ukraine, United Kingdom, United States, President Kuchma, Prime Minister Blair, President Bush. That was not sitting well with Washington or London at the time because of the nature of what was happening and concerns both on governance and decisions that President Kuchma had taken. Lord Robertson came up with the idea then to flip to the French alphabet, the other official language of NATO, putting the United States under E, États-Unis, the United Kingdom under R, Royaume-Uni, separating President Kuchma from President Bush and Prime Minister Blair. I only offer that because I think it illustrates how the perception, particularly in Washington, of the decisions that President Yanukovych is taking can have significant impacts on our engagement, a significant impact on our engagement. I think it hits at the core of the issue, and I think as Deputy Foreign Minister Klimkin acknowledged this morning, there's a direct link between internal reforms and foreign policy objectives. And so my thesis on all of this is that governance has a significant, huge impact on U.S. policy, U.S. strategy. If you put it in the perspective of, think about the Orange Team. Obviously, at the time, it was a team that presided over an opening in terms of democratic space in Ukraine. But I was in government at the time, working heavily in the Ukraine account. And many senior American officials, while not giving up, came close to giving up. Of incredible frustration because of issues of governance, because of the infighting between the President and the Prime Minister. Because of the lack of effective governance, we actually felt like we did not have partners with whom we could engage. And so while there was strong support for Ukraine's move to the West, the vision that was articulated, it's the issues of governance seeped the energy, sapped the energy that existed, the momentum that was really there, I think, at the beginning of the days of the Orange governments, undermining the potential of the U.S.-Ukraine partnership. If you think about where we are now, I think it actually cuts both ways. In many respects, if you're a U.S. government interlocutor, U.S. businessman, you finally have a fairly effective, fairly coherent partner with whom you can get things done. Some cases on which many of the audience have seen here, cases on which many of those in the audience have worked for years that were stuck in Ukraine have actually moved in the past couple of years under this administration. Some particular investment cases, some particular energy cases that have been thorns in the side of the U.S.-Ukraine bilateral relationship have moved. We've seen this government make far more credible progress in working with the European Union than the previous one had. We've talked about administration reform, consolidation of agencies, the healthcare, pension, education. There's a whole set of issues related to governance that have opened up some opportunities in the bilateral relationship. But at the same time, the tenor of the discussion that we are having today, I think it underscores how much of that can be undermined by the concerns that folks have about Ukraine's democratic trajectory. It almost leaves you with the appearance of the Ukrainian government pursuing contradictory goals, moving to Europe while amassing emasculating of political opposition. And at a certain point, those two goals are contradictory, and they're not viable options. The governance issue, I think, can't be separated. If you think about issues from a foreign policy perspective, Ukraine's been trying to pursue a fairly stable relationship with Russia. And that's something that Washington actually really wants to do. Ukraine's been serious about negotiations with the European Union. Again, something that Washington supports. On discrete foreign policy issues, Ukraine's often been in a good spot, whether playing a useful behind-the-scenes role relating to political prisoners in Belarus, or even stepping up to the plate in some unexpected ways on issues like Libya. If you were to divorce internal issues, divorce governance, the foreign policy process isn't so bad. It lends support for a strong relationship. Not to mention the cooperation on highly enriched uranium, which I'll mention in a moment. But it's not taken in isolation. That set of issues doesn't exist in isolation. The way I like to think about it as a former U.S. policymaker is that there's the potential for a narrow and a broad relationship with Ukraine. It's almost a minimalist and maximalist option that exists. The minimalist approach is going to be based on real strategic issues, an interest-based relationship based on strategic issues, where we can do deals of common interest. And this administration has demonstrated that it's good at doing deals. The deal on highly enriched uranium is a very significant deal on the part of Ukraine and strategically important to us. It has driven the relationship between President Obama and President Trump to the stage. Some of the deals that we've seen on the Gulf of Mexico. This is where Yanukovych can be a partner, and frankly has been a better partner than what we had in Ukraine over the recent years. But the maximalist side of this is one that captures the idea of a relationship that's not just premised on doing deals and the interest behind it, but it's really premised on the values underpinning the relationship. The United States becomes far more invested in Ukraine's success, far more invested in Ukraine's aspirations, and this hits at the heart of backing into European integration. And this is where I think governance is at the core. Without those issues of internal reforms, democracy, governance, this is where the U.S. buy-in to the visions of Ukraine becomes shaky. I think we all want to hear a vision of an independent, sovereign Ukraine with a strong democratic institutions and free markets embedded in Europe and as a partner of both the United States and Russia. This requires certain decisions on the part of Ukrainian authorities. And I think getting the United States to not just buy into the vision rhetorically, but energetically, it's at the heart of our perception of governance issues. As Ukraine consolidates a democratic path, I think it increases the possibility of a partnership with the United States. Likewise, as Ukraine backslides, if we see the Ukraine in a few years becoming more of a post-Soviet kleptocracy, autocracy, it really will place limitations on how far Washington is going to go in the partnership. The good thing is that what this means in some respects is that Ukraine can shape the foreign policy environment and can help shape U.S. foreign policy. That said, I think we all need to be realistic. Ukraine is not and never will be on the top of the foreign policy agenda. Furthermore, the idea of completing Europe forward free, of integrating the unfinished business, finishing the unfinished business of Europe's east, it's not exactly on the front burner in Washington either. But it becomes easier to downgrade these priorities if Ukraine is perceived as messy, corrupt, difficult, non-democratic. But the administration, I think, has demonstrated it wants to give this away. I think Vice President Biden in particular has been particularly engaged. So if you shift to U.S. foreign policy, I think the premise is that Ukraine can help determine its own future. I think that's something I've said before, but the West does have a role to play in Washington as well. First of all, I think there is a perception in Ukraine that the West has lost its interest. And I think events like this conference today, but also this is where I think we need to change that perception and help not just Ukrainian government officials, but civil society and the others understand that we have not disengaged, we haven't lost it. Second, I think this means that democracy does need to be high on our bilateral agenda. Cooperation on strategic issues, cooperation on economic issues should continue, but it shouldn't imply that Ukraine will win a free pass on issues of democracy. That's not how we do business, and I think that needs to be clear. Third, I think this does speak to the importance of engaging Ukraine. That the administration should be supporting Ukrainian efforts and Ukrainian reforms where it makes sense. Should be seeking through engaging their counterparts, the president, various ministers. Just because there are things we disagree with on issues of democratic issues of governance doesn't mean we stop talking. They need to hear from U.S. senior officials on a regular and ongoing basis to be able to help provide a counterweight perspective. Elections need to be at the top of that agenda. This needs to be the upcoming litmus test. The Venice Commission approval of the electoral code and meeting standards of the Council of Europe and others will be critically important. Next, I think sustaining U.S. assistance. This is a tough fiscal budgetary climate. This U.S. assistance, particularly to countries like Ukraine, will come under pressure. But I would argue that even if per capita GDP increases in a country like Ukraine, the role for U.S. support for NGO issues, NGO sectors is increasingly important to be protected. Expanding exchange programs into the visa issue. This is most important for Europe, but the United States has a role to play as well in opening our borders to Ukraine for their academic institutions. And finally, I think perhaps the most important thing for U.S. policy is for us to continue to press and work with the European Union to move forward in its negotiations with Europe. The European Union is the game changer for Ukraine, not necessarily the United States. And I think this is where the United States has an important supporting role to play. So to conclude, why does this matter? I think it matters a lot because of what's at stake. I do think that in many respects Ukraine is at an inflection point. And the decisions and actions that are taken today by the Ukrainian government, but also by Ukraine's civil society, by its political opposition, and by the West, they will determine whether the country gradually evolves into a European democracy or whether it slips back into a corrupt post-Soviet authoritarian state. Unfortunately, both of these futures are possible. Only one is preferable, and I hope that U.S. policy could be a part of helping us move forward with that first vision.